Hi there, this is G, and welcome back to the third part in my Paradox Breakdown series. Now, I'm sure a lot of you will be glad to know that this one will be predominantly in re-noise, and so I've got lots to get into with breaks and bass techniques, and just going to go through everything I have put together for the demo track that I just put up last night. So I'm going to be going through in as much detail all the little tips and tricks I have for this Paradox-esque style of drum and bass. Now, I know my demo track doesn't sound exactly like his music, but I have definitely been referencing this song called Pt.3 in particular, which is an Alaska song, and I've really tried to just do a bit of a mix between his sort of more ambient drum and bass rolling side under Alaska, and then his more paradoxy stuff with some of the crazy basses and drum work which I've done in the drops of this tune. Anyway, I'll give you a little demo now and then we can start breaking things down. Okay, so I've gone a little bit wild with the theme there, and I've been getting really into Midjourney, and I'm just seeing how I can use this AI image generator in my own work and making cool videos for you guys. So just experimenting there, but the theme of snakes in space with whatever else I've got going on the track is, I'm kind of crowbarring a few things in, but it was fun to make anyway. So there you go. But anyway, let's get into this track, and to start with, I'm actually going to go over some of the ambiances and the textures. Now, Paradox actually does this quite a lot on his own music, especially under his alias Alaska, where he will build almost an entire track on top of one of these sound beds or these atmospheres. One way obviously to do this is to take a sample and just to find one of those samples, maybe pitch it down, can be a very interesting thing to do. And if you listen to his track Pt.3, which is actually the main track I referenced for my one, you can hear he's used this sample by Brian Bennett called Solstice, and you can hear that basically running the entire way through the track, and he's just built his drums on top of it. So a cool way of actually making these textures is to use Pull Stretch, and for any of you who don't know about Pull Stretch, it's a really cool time stretching plugin. It's free, and there's this, it's kind of a standalone plugin now, and you can basically just drag and drop audio in here, and then you can choose how much you stretch it by. And so I've just stretched this. I found this quite nice clip here called Summer Slips Away by the Jazz Ensemble. And these types of ones are perfect where there's already quite good ambient content in there. There's not too much drum stuff going on. You can get some really nice textures when you drag this into Pull Stretch. So maybe let's go to the beginning of my process here, and I'll just quickly run through what I've done. So I've just scooped a little bit of that super low out, and if I just play this here, I just don't want any of the rumble right at the bottom there that's in the sample. Okay, and then the next thing I've just gone and just done a little bit of driving actually, just to add a bit of saturation there. And then this is the thing I've done quite a lot on here is the resampler, which is basically acting like a filter in decimal, and it's getting rid of all of that crispy digital tops that are in the sample. And I know sometimes you might want that stuff, but I actually think that really reveals that this sample's been time stretched, and by taking that away I can kind of camouflage a little bit of what I've actually done. And then to do more camouflaging, I've actually used a reverb again, so that's just smothering over some of the stretching artifacts. And then I've also gone and done some filter freak with some very slow modulation, it looks like. So just moving the filter cut off even more, a little bit more modulation, so that's just doing a bit of movement, and then a little bit of limiting, but that's not actually doing anything, that's just gaining it up, so no limiting there, just a bit of gain out of that plugin. And so I'm then left with this. So it's cool, and you can hear there that there's loads of potential to get nice pads and just background noises, just like Paradox does in his track. We can take them out of this big audio chop. But one more step I actually like to do is to add a few more layers on top of the original sample. So what I would generally do is go, and I've always got mixed in key, which is such a handy little plugin here on my main bus. And I'll run it through mixed in key, and I can see this is a D minor, but it might change. Yes, it's mostly D minor. And I will actually load an arcade up, and I will go to either this Distant Voices, or there's another really good one called Aura. And I will find some nice sounds, and then I will just start to layer them on top of these long stretch samples, just to give me more interesting things to work with when I bring that into Renoise later on. So that one's working really well there. So you can see here I've got the sample now. This is the one I bounced out before, which had the original pull stretch sample in it, and then I've layered lots of nice vocals and dreamy little pad sounds over the top, and just to give it a bit more density and interest. So like delayed vocals are really good, lots of reverb. Okay, so the next step for me is actually to bring the whole bit of audio into Renoise, and there's a few techniques I like to go for here. And actually with this track, I had it originally doing this technique where you can see I've put slice markers in all over this atmospheric bit. And I've actually got like a long attack and release, so you can fade the two samples together when you want to layer chops from different parts of the Atmos together. But actually the problem I was kind of having was that this sample, it kept moving a little bit too much harmonically, and it was just really hard. The whole track just sort of lost its purpose when this long Atmos would move into like the next note of that stretch sample. So what I actually did instead was to take little chunks. So I just went and found the little bits that I really liked and copied them to a new track, and then use ping pong loops. And in this way you get a much more stable background sound, and this worked a lot better for me for building my track over the top of. And you can hear they're actually quite nice just to listen to on their own, these pads, and a lot of that is all the movement that they have from the original sample, but also from the layers, the vocal layers. It starts sounding really nice when they're looping back and forwards, and they have all their own rhythms happening because of the way the ping pong loops have been set. So just creates an interesting sound bed for the whole track to sit on. As well as the Atmos, I've also got some textures, and I've got a few different things going on here. For the ambient sort of intro parts of the track, I've got this sort of stuff happening. It's like a windy ice sound. Some insect noises, just little things to just be in there. You're not hearing them too loud, but so I have one set of textures going in the intro sections, but actually when I change the vibe of the track a little bit in these more eerie breakdown sections before the drop, I have to change the textures to go with whatever else is happening in the track. So here I've started to use loads of snake noises and just eerie slithering yeah, so the point I'm just making there is that if you get to new parts of the track where you're slightly changing the theme or moving in a new direction, you've really got to match the textures to whatever's happening in the rest of the track. Let's get into some of the other effects now, and maybe starting with risers. Now, the clue is kind of in the name, and rising is like a rising in energy or in pitch or in frequency or in distortion or reverb or delay, and actually all these things are good ways to create risers. And one really easy thing I do in Renoise is just to come and I'm doing a volume envelope here, which is increasing over time. And then a pitch envelope, which is increasing over time. But you can see I've changed the pitch range to be a massive amount, and that's going to give me just a wider pitch range. And what I've actually done is just looped a really simple. So that is just some random buzzy. I mean, you can do this with so many random sounds. So that's a random buzzy sound there. And that's kind of like an engine noise. And then if I put them together, and they've both got a very similar, I think they've both got the same pitch and volume envelopes on them. And that's really just a very simple way to create very effective risers that you can match to your track. And the main thing there is actually to make sure you're pulling away the volume at the right time and matching the envelope of the riser to fit with the drop. In the same way that I use two different riser sounds there to just give a more interesting sonic texture, I've also done the same with the crash here, and I've layered it in a slightly different way. I've just layered it both in the instrument stage here, so you can just create a new sample and then you can kind of copy in any sound and just drag them into a sample in this way. And I've layered this cymbal where this is actually me breathing into my mic to create a smoke effects that I did for a previous tutorial. But when you layer sounds together like that, I've definitely heard in some of Paradox's tracks he likes to use like ice sounds and smoke sounds as well as crashes, or layered with crashes, just to make them sound a little bit more interesting. I think one thing I'm also doing there is just panning them right and left, so they're split in the stereo field. So another thing to note is, in true Paradox style, I've done lots of Dubby effects. I've actually just got a send track here with a delay on it, which has just got a really high feedback amount, and I've just put the delay on milliseconds and just played around until I had something that sounds quite nice. So I'm making the delay go off time with my track. And so I'm sending a lot of these effects are actually going to this delay channel. So like a crazy long delay, but it really helps to make those effects sound massive. Whilst using those really long delays does get you very close to the sound we're looking for, if we were actually going to be a bit truer to the style, we would do more dub style delays. Now these are quite similar to set up, but there is a few more things you've got to think about. So what I've done here is I'm sending a track here with a send just to this return or this bus. And on here, I've created a doofer just to make this really easy for me to map everything out, control everything, and to show you. And the first thing you're going to do is need a delay plugin. Now, if I just take these away, the actual native plugin in Renoise doesn't let you go over 100% feedback. And another thing you can't do is actually send a return track back to itself. So your only option to do these delays properly, these dub style delays properly, is to get a plugin which lets you do more than 100% feedback. And whatever you think about Waves' business model or business practices, the H delay is a fantastic delay plugin and it goes up to 200 feedback. So that's really useful for this style of effect. So what you got to do essentially is take it off whatever sync or host function it has, and you want it to be controlled by the milliseconds of the delay. So I've got milliseconds happening here, and then I've got feedback I've mapped, and then the next thing I could have actually mapped the output gain of this, but you see it only goes to -18, and I think it's quite useful to be able to actually completely reduce the output of the delay plugin. So instead I've mapped a gainer after it, and so I can pull the gain. It's going from 0 down to nothing. And the other thing is actually on the feedback, I'm only letting it go up to 130. I don't think it's necessary to have the whole 200. It just gets really crazy when you go anything above 130 really. And then two extra things I've got is a filter and a spring reverb. So those are both kind of true to the dub style as well. And actually a limiter right at the end of this chain. Yeah, so let's get into this. What do we actually need to do? So really the only way to do this effectively is to use a MIDI controller. And if you can see here, I've got a fader Fox, and this is a great little MIDI controller, and it's really easy to set this stuff up in Renoise. So the first thing we've got to map is the actual send from the track. So I'm going to map that in there, and then I'm going to come into my return track, and then I'm going to start mapping things one by one in here. One, two, three, four, and then one more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. So the whole idea here is you send little bits with your send. You just catch like a little bit of the sample that you're trying to create a dub delay from, and then it hits into this high feedback, and then you can do whatever with the reverbs and the filters at the end of it. Anyway, if I just show you now, I kind of set the milliseconds just to start with, and let's just play a little bit with this. So really crazy dub style delays there. The vocals are great for chucking in here. I'm just looking at a little sample pack at the moment, just to find something that's cool to chuck in. I'm on a massive ball.